We see that there is negotiations through force right now. Negotiations are continuing despite having the de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz by Iran, the US blockade, and ongoing fighting. It continues. However, Iran is still at the table because money, prospects of money, keep Iran at the table. Also, they are dealing altogether with the fate and the future of the Strait of Hormuz. And they are showing potential new alliance, new accommodation, and this is all ongoing behind backdoor. And behind the rhetorics and behind the propaganda, I think discussions are still ongoing and proceeding.
Leslie, if I'm a country that is historically dependent upon Mideast oil, I have to rethink my strategy, right? I can't depend on, because I can't think of a scenario where the Strait of Hormuz may ever be completely free and open. What are those countries in Asia, in Europe, how do they think about that?
So I think the silver lining in all this crisis is that the Hormuz Strait is a one-time leverage for Iran. Now that they have used it, now that they have exposed to the whole world that they can use their arsenal of missiles and de facto close the strait, all the other countries around it that depend on it will diversify at all costs their routes, their exports, and find alternatives. It may take months, it may take years, but I think we've seen the peak of Iran using it as a weapon.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. It might be a one-time card here. So what are some of the alternatives? As I just look at that part of the world, I think, do we have to build more pipelines and stuff to get rid of, to de-emphasize the strait? But those aren't necessarily secure as well.
So it's an interesting question, because if we look at the LNG market that was increasingly becoming at one point more liquid, a little bit more like oil, thanks to LNG, which is seaborne transportation, the opposite of a marriage between a buyer and a seller with a fixed point A to fixed point B, and you cannot change the route. We may go back to a more 50-50 ratio, depending on where you're based. But at the end of the day, countries will want to diversify routes, pricing, sources, and fuels. Right. I'm a big advocate of multi-fuel hedging or multi-energy hedging. I think we're increasingly in a world where we cannot say no to any energy and take everything we can.
Right.
And that depends on domestic resources.
Right.
Financing, and geopolitical alignment.
Let's go short term with you. I find huge debate right now. Well, one segment of the debate, rather, is there will be a jump condition in Brent out to a higher price. What does the present microeconomics of oil look like to Leslie Palti-Guzman?
So there is, if we look at the U.S. market, there is a fear of potential inflation, a fear, there are different deadlines that the president is looking at. But I think right now he decided, to go to war against Iran and has to prove to the American people and the global and the world that we are better off after the war than we were before. And the price of oil, I think, will eventually go down once there is a holding ceasefire and that the sea lanes are deemed safe enough to resume traffic.
Are you surprised? I'm looking at Brent at $98 a barrel. Are you surprised we're not at 140, 150 a barrel? I mean, I'm kind of surprised that the market isn't much higher and much more concerned.
Yes, and we have the same question on the natural gas side for LNG also. And, on the LNG side, for example, my reasons is that we were already in a structurally long market before, and there is some optimistic about new sources of supply, and same for oil. We're looking at new capacity coming online and away from the Middle East. Also, demand has been very disciplined, at least on the LNG side, and procurement discipline and demand destruction have also contributed to where the prices are. And eventually, the fact that China, didn't buy emergency LNG cargoes, for example, alleviated the market, and Europe didn't have, for example, to compete with Asia to attract cargoes yet.
What, when you wake up in the morning, do you listen to about the fractured dialogue between us and Iran? Do you listen to Qatar? Do you listen to Pakistan? What's the intermediary that you find of most value?
Well, first, I'm trying to cut through the noise and try to understand what is propaganda, what is not propaganda, what is rhetoric, what is not. I thought it was interesting a few days ago to hear the U.S. threatening Oman, who is an ally from the U.S., but I think it was a message to the rest of the Middle East, to the Gulf countries, that reopening the Strait of Hormuz, there is a need for a unified cohort of countries that will resist accommodating with Iran. I think many countries that are depending on Iran right now are trying to accommodate and appease and are ready to give a fee to Iran. And I think it will be, the coming days are going to be critical to see if we see the emergence of this kind of a new procedures, new system around the Strait of Hormuz, or whether it's going to be a fully open strait.